So yesterday we had the introductory session, and we designated as the basic introduction to the Ṛgveda. And this today's we are actually primarily focusing on the summary of the Ṛgvedic chronology. So anybody who have attended the last week's talk, they will be recollecting that we have briefly touched upon the chronology, the basic Ṛgvedic chronology. So the reason is being that is one of the foundational aspect of whatever we are having as part of this 1 year kind of a course. So a little bit of today's session we have also included in the previous week's session. Today when I will be talking about it again, it will be basically refreshing the memory, as well as it will have a repeat the previous session on the chronology once again, so that it becomes with more clarity and becomes a foundational aspect. So as Suraj mentioned, today's class, it will be a very short recap of the chronology of the Ṛgveda that we have done in the last week, and we will be like winding up in a very short period, and whatever planning is we have half an hour sessions and around 10 to 15 minutes of interaction. So it will be like 7 to 7:45 like that. But of course, if there are many discussions and questions, and then we can go up to the 8 o'clock. But most likely we'll have a half an hour session of the discussion focusing on the chronology, and then 15 minutes of interaction. When we say Ṛgveda, most of the people will have an impression of a collection of suktas and mandalas. But since from the last session, we understand that it is consisting of 10 mandalas, like the 18 parvas of Mahabharata or 7 kandas of Ramayana. So we have the 10 Ṛgvedic mandalas. And I mentioned about the threefold division into the Ṛgvedic mandalas, where the first is the early Ṛgveda, or early. I will also use in my sessions the terms like early Ṛgvedic period, or middle Ṛgveda, which defines the middle Ṛgvedic period, and then late Ṛgveda, or the late Ṛgvedic period. Because there is a kind of chronology, the absolute chronology also to these mandalas. So, and very insightful questions in the last session, people ask about, is there any cultural differences between the early Ṛgvedic, late Ṛgvedic, middle Ṛgvedic period? So it is there, and it is very much there is a kind of a separation of minimum of 1,000 years between the early Ṛgvedic period and the late Ṛgvedic period, if not more than that. So that is also very clear in the study of the Ṛgvedic chronology. So just as a recap, we have the 6th, 3rd, and the 7th mandalas as the early Ṛgvedic period, and we have the 4th and 2nd as the middle Ṛgvedic period, and 5, 8, 9, and 10 as the late Ṛgvedic period. So these 3 divisions, I think everybody will be like clearly understanding. And there is something special about the first mandala, which is seen on the top. It is like distributed between towards the end of the early Ṛgvedic period, towards somewhere to the beginning of the late Ṛgvedic period, with some very little overlap with the 8th mandala, and extremely little overlap maybe with the 7th mandala, like that, and a lot of overlap between the middle Ṛgvedic period. So that is how the this particular first mandala is. like laid out in the chronology. Second point, which I have not mentioned in my previous session, is if you look at the number of suktas, it is both of this first mandala and the 10th mandala, we have 191 suktas. So this is also by design. So it also gives you a hint that the 10th mandala and the first mandala were updated towards the end of the composition of the Ṛgveda. When we say that towards the end of the composition of the Ṛgveda, we have mostly it is in the generation of the Vasishta's descendants like Shakti, Parashara, Vyasa. Then we know that in the Mahabharata, Vyasa is mentioned as the person who have studied the Ṛgveda, which is the work of his own ancestors like Vasishta, and then he has done some arrangements. So it is it happened in the generation of Veda Vyasa, and there are other like great personalities like Shaunaka. All these people are were very much active in defining the Ṛgvedic or configuring the Ṛgvedic, the final shape of the Ṛgveda. So that has happened. So that is why there is a 191 suktas in the first mandala and in the 10th mandala, like that. So this is how this is one another aspect which I am bringing into the focus to today's session. And I also mentioned about the nature of the each mandala. For example, if you focus on the early Ṛgvedic period and the early mandalas, we have the 6th mandala, which is primarily the composers belonging to the Bharadwaja family. So you can see Bharadwaja here. And he, the Bharadwaja family is one of the earliest contributors to the Ṛgveda, 6th mandala being a Bharadwaja mandala. And they were very much have a relationship with the kings of that period, that is the Dibodasa, who is one of the oldest Raja or king, a Ṛgvedic king, which we get to mention in the Ṛgveda. And he, so that Dibodasa spirit is corresponded to the 6th mandala period. And the Bharadwajas were like the advisors or the priests of the kings like Dibodasa. And that is the nature of the 6th mandala. And later we will see that in the 6th mandala period, they were active in Saraswati and this in the region of Haryana, for example. And then we have the even Ganga is also mentioned in the 6th mandala, which is again something which is very much connected to the out of India theory of Indo-European migration. So in this last session, one of the students asked about whether we are touching about Aryan invasion theory or a refutation of it. So yes, this information that I am talking about, that is Ganga is mentioned in the earliest mandala, that is 6th mandala, gives an immediate hint about where the original people who have been contributing the Ṛgveda were in the earliest period. And since Ganga is mentioned in the 6th mandala itself, it gives a clear indication that they were native to Bharata or living in somewhere in the vicinity of the Ganga river. And then we have the 3rd mandala. And I mentioned that this mandala is dominated by Vishwamitra. And he was in the capacity of an advisor to the King Sudas, who is a descendant of the Dibodasa. So Dibodasa is an ancestor. King Sudas is a descendant of Dibodasa. So Ṛgveda is not very clear about how many number of generations elapsed between Dibodasa and Sudas. Because, for example, anybody reading Mahabharata or Ramayana, they will see Valmiki and Vyasa very clearly mention about a lineage of kings. And mostly they will say, okay, Rama's father Dasharatha, Dasharatha's father Aja. So there is a very clear definition of the lineage list. But Ṛgveda is not doing anything like that, because the information in the Ṛgveda is very fragmentary compared to whatever you are seeing in the Itihasas. So that is called a narrative continuity. So Ṛgveda is not structured in terms of a text which have a kind of a narrative continuity where it talks about what happened first and what happened second and what happened next. So there is no narrative continuity like that in the Ṛgveda, because it's a collection of suktas which is praising the Ṛgvedic devatas. So no composer of the Ṛgveda have any thought of creating any kind of lineage definition, creating a kind of a sequence of kings and defining who is ancestor, who is descendant, anything like that. But whatever like this picture that of this diagram, it is a result of very meticulous studies that Srikant Dalgiri has done as part of his primary books. And anybody who is interested in knowing about how he arrived at this chronology, that they can go through the books I mentioned in the last talk, that is the Ṛgveda, the Ṛgveda historical analysis, and Ṛgveda and Avastha, the final evidence. So these two books, and there is a third book he has authored in 2019. So these books are very much about how this particular diagram is arrived at and how the relationships are established. So for our book, for our study, this is like a foundation from where we start adding additional, expand that particular scholarship. So for us, it is a foundational aspect. So as I said, there was a sixth mandala period where the Bharadwaja was the Bharadwaja means it's not a single individual, but the Bharadwaja's lineage of composers or ascetics or poets. They were the priest, and there is Purohita, and then Divodasa was the Raja, the king. And after some time, and we don't know how many number of generations, we had Sudas as his descendant, and Vishwamitra was his advisor. And during this period, we don't have any kind of very strict rule that a priest means he will always be a kind of recitation of the hymns or like that. Because we see in the Ṛgveda, in the third mandala, Vishwamitra was also a warrior. He was also a person who led the armies, etc. So that concept emerged later, where there is a clear differentiation between a Brahmana or a Kshatriya. So those emerged later in the late Ṛgvedic period. And this is also another aspect I have mentioned, like the cultural aspects of early Ṛgveda and the late Ṛgvedic period are there is a lot of variation, and one of the variation is this. So they were not fully differentiated into a Brahmana or a Kshatriya like that. They were not fully differentiated into warrior or a Yodha or a priest. So they have a dual functionality. So Vishwamitra is an advisor to Sudas. Doesn't mean that he will not lead an army and have his own military expeditions, etc. Because we see exactly like that in the third mandala, where Vishwamitra is leading army of Sudas. He is bringing the Sudas army, means it is crossing the two rivers, the confluence of two rivers, Bias and Satluj, that is Vipas and Shududri, and that is happening. So those things are all mentioned in the third mandala. And then after some time, that is when I say after some time, there is no big gap between happened between sixth and third mandala. Almost contemporaneous with Vishwamitra, Vasishta was another advisor to Sudas. So there is very light hints that third mandala is the older and the seventh is the later. So that we can say that Vasishta became an advisor to Sudas after Vishwamitra. So initially it was Vishwamitra who was the advisor of Sudas, and later Vasishta became the advisor of Sudas. And there is nothing mentioned in the Ṛgveda why it become like that. Did Vishwamitra leave Sudas because of any particular reason? It is not clearly mentioned in the Ṛgveda. And what happened to Vishwamitra when Vasishtha became the priest of Sudas? That also not mentioned in the Ṛgveda. But chronologically, the third mandala is earlier than seventh mandala, and the chronological gap is not very big because in both mandalas we have King Sudas as the ruler. It's only because Vishwamitra composed many suktas belonging to himself and his family, and compiled all those things together as the third mandala. And Vasishtha, when he was the advisor of Sudas, he has compiled it and made it as a kind of another collection of the mandalas as a seventh mandala. So that is a very, very faint and very light understanding about the slight difference in the chronology, but more or less they are in the same period. So this is all about the what you call the early mandalas or early Ṛgvedic period. So we had a period of the Vodasa, and then we had a period of Sudas, with the two advisors officiated as a priest of Sudas, and that is a period of the early Ṛgveda or early Ṛgvedic period. And then later on, we started seeing in the Ṛgveda some of the descendants of Sudas, like Sahadeva. As I mentioned, this Sahadeva is different from the Pandava Sahadeva, who is a younger brother of Arjuna. So this Sahadeva is a Ṛgvedic king who is a descendant of Sudas, and most of this Sahadeva's military activity, etc., is mentioned in the early part of the first mandala. This is mentioned, and then we see Somaka, another the descendant of Sahadeva. And between Sahadeva and Somaka, for the very it is very rare in Ṛgveda, there is indication of a father-son relationship. So Somaka could be the direct son of Sahadeva, not necessarily a descendant who is a grandson or grandson or like that. So there is some kind of a hint or indication that Somaka is a direct son of Sahadeva, but otherwise it's not stressed much. But it is also kind of a special detail that we get. So we have a Somaka who is a son of Sahadeva. So this is like the Vodasa, Sudas, Sahadeva, and Somaka are the most dominant kings of a particular family, and this family is called Tritsu. That also I will try to introduce that word Tritsu, because we will learn it quite a lot in the subsequent sessions. And this is a Bharata family. It's a branch of the Bharata family, and the term used by Ṛgveda is Tritsu. But after reading the later books, we get the understanding that they were all ancestors of the Panchalas. So whatever described in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata as Panchalas, so the ancestors of the Panchalas, they are mentioned as Tritsu or Tritsu Bharata, like that in the Ṛgveda. And all these four kings are actually ancestors of the Panchalas. And the Somaka was somewhere in the active in the fourth mandala. And of course, I forgot to mention Ṛgvashva. He was actually acting like similar to Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, and Bharadwaja, like a priest of Sahadeva. So again, I have to mention the priesthood and the royalty, the king and the priest, no big separation between them. So sometimes we see, for example, in the case of Vishwamitra, they may be leading armies, fighting battles, etc. Even in case of Vasishtha, it is not very clear, but he is mentioned as a witness of the Dashrajana battle, the very famous battle in the Ṛgveda mentioned. So we don't know whether Vasishtha participated there as a soldier or he was just a witness of the battlefield. But definitely he was very much witnessing or watching things in the battlefield is very clear. So that is the same thing with Ṛgvashva and Sahadeva, Vamadeva and Somaka. So Vamadeva was the priest or advisor of Somaka, very active in the fourth mandala, and he is a Gautama family. And we have Kritsamada, who is a very interesting. From the Angirasa family, he has shifted to the Bhargava family. So again, it is a very rare situation, which is somewhat recorded in the Ṛgveda of a change of the Kula or what you call Gotra of the family Gotra change. So there are certain individuals who change the Gotra as well. So one from the one family to another family, like that it has happened. So this is the middle period, Ṛgvedic period, and then we start slowly moving to the late Ṛgvedic period, where we have Atri, the very famous sage, and we have Atrayas. Currently, many people have the surname Atraya. So they are all belonging to the Atri Gotra and Atri family. And Atri is dominating in the 5th mandala, which is one of the youngest of the family mandalas. And I've used the word family mandala last week, where I said the 6, 3, 7, 4, 2, and 5. These are all the family mandalas. And it is again three parts, three type of family. I mean, it is again divided into 2. The early family mandalas, which are the early Ṛgvedic period, 6, 3, and 7. The late family mandala, that is 4, 2, and 5. So Atri is the Atri mandala is the almost the youngest of the family mandala, and it shows the attributes of a late Ṛgvedic period. That is why it is included in the late Ṛgveda. So it is a late Ṛgvedic period mandala, but it is also part of a family mandala. So it's a kind of a very special mandala like that. And then you have the 8th mandala. So I know like one of the students have noted that there is an error in the book. So thanks for that correction, and highly appreciate anybody finding errors, typo errors or other kind of errors in the book. So it will be very useful for me as an author. So anyway, the picture is showing very clear that 8th mandala is later to all the family mandalas. But I think I have wrongly mentioned it as a earlier. So that's a kind of a slip of that change of meaning. So 8th mandala, definitely it is later than, just like what happens now, is a later than all the family mandalas, and it is part of the late Ṛgvedic period. And I mentioned it is there are so many ascetics, so many composers, so many poets. So we cannot define that it is belonging to a particular family or gotra. So that is why it is mentioned here as mixed like that. And as I mentioned, there is a collection of Soma Suktas, whose entire subject of all the Suktas, that is 114 Suktas in the Soma Mandala, is about Soma, that is preparation of Soma, how it is brought from a particular location where it is extracted from Soma plants, and how it is filtered. So a lot of processes are all explained in the Soma. And of course, Soma is the kind of precursor to the concept of Amrita, which is mentioned in the Itihasas and Puranas. But in the Ṛgveda, Soma is treated as something like a kind of a physical drink extracted from plants, and also with adding a lot of ingredients. And the primary purpose of Soma is mentioned as it is a stimulant. So definitely, like many people compare Soma with alcohol, etc. We have so many movies released in India in different languages, where people say Soma is a kind of an alcoholic kind of drink which create hallucinations. Okay, but it's there is a slight difference. Definitely, Soma is capable of changing the mental state, but if you classify it, it doesn't came in the category of the alcohols, etc. It is coming in the category of a stimulant, which means the alcohol, what it does is it damp the brain cells, and it reduces your attention capability and make you numb. The Soma is the opposite of it. When you drink Soma, it reduces, for example, it allows you to see clearly, hear clearly. So your sense organs become more sharper. So it's a direct opposite of what the alcohol does. The alcohols, the sense organs become reduce in capacity, but this will increase in capacity. So one of the reasons Soma is used for victory in battles, where you will be much more sharper than. So, for example, when you are defending with your weapons, or aiming at the enemy. No, all these places, your eyes, hands, ears, everything will become multiple or double or triple level sharper. So this is one of the purpose of Soma. And of course, it also allows you to have when you have a sharper mind, you will be able to understand things more better. So you will be able to learn things. So one of the biggest achievement of our tradition is, without using pen and paper for more than 4,000 years, can be even 5,000 or 6,000, we were able to have this Ṛgveda recited again and again, and till today, it is being recited. So all these kind of capabilities only because of of course, not only Soma, but Soma played an important role in that. And then, of course, you have the 10th mandala, and I have mentioned Talagiri's chronology is what we follow here. But even if you are, if many people, different chronologies of different earlier scholars, even they agree on that, including AIT or OIT, whichever be the paradigm, they agree that the 10th mandala is the youngest mandala. So there is no dispute on about that among any scholar. And in the 10th mandala, we don't see anybody in the Tritsu Bharata lineage, because the last famous king was Somaka, and of course there were so many other kings in that lineage, but they were not very famous. We suddenly see a Kuru king, Shantanu, very prominently. I don't say dominate, but very prominently it is noticeable in the 10th mandala. And Shantanu also had a kind of his own brother was actually like something like a advisor to him, like a priest or a Purahita to him. And of course, the Shantanu and Devapi are not mentioned as brothers inside the Ṛgveda, because that information is not there in Ṛgveda. But it is only based on the understanding we get from Mahabharata that we consider them to be brother. But this brotherhood relationship is not found in Ṛgveda. So that is what the 10th mandala is all about. And the 10th mandala is the most familiar to many people because of the Purusha Sukta inside that, which describe about the 4 Varnas, and about Nasadiya Sukta, which is philosophical in nature, and a lot of funeral hymns. So the culture was highly vibrant and expanded during the 10th mandala period. The complexity of the society increased, and the 4 Varnas are actually the result of the complexity. So when your society is having less complex, then you don't need any rules. So when it become more complex, then the many kind of social rules started emerging, and the 4 Varna concept, everything started emerging somewhere around the 10th mandala. So that is also mentioned in the Purusha Sukta of the Ṛgveda. We will focus on closely on that and look at it from the fresh point of view, eliminating any kind of correct misconceptions, and also bringing some correct conception of the this particular Purusha Sukta. And you have a lot of philosophical thoughts emerging in the 10th mandala. That is Nasadiya Sukta, which is basically about inquiring about how the universe is created, what was there before the creation of the universe. So you can see it is something like the scientific inquiry, the kind of same mind of a scientist. So that the Rishi started exhibiting that nature. And this particular scientific inquiry and the thoughts are captured in the 10th mandala of the Ṛgveda, like in the suktas like Nasadiya Sukta, which expanded the philosophical thought of the Ṛgvedic people. And that is finally these philosophical thoughts, the understanding things in the philosophically, that resulted into the subsequent and it started growing and growing, and then after Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and all of them becomes the main subject of the Upanishads. So everything has its beginning in the late Ṛgvedic period, where the philosophical thoughts started emerging, and the suktas become more and more philosophical in nature, and more cultural in nature, like suktas for marriage, suktas for funerals, that is death rituals. So you see every aspect of the human life, from birth, death, and marriage. There were suktas representing that in the 10th mandala. And this block I don't need to explain, because if Shantanu is in the 10th mandala mentioned as a contemporary, then naturally Shantanu's son Vichitra Virya, his son Dhritarashtra, and Vichitra Virya's son Dhritarashtra and Pandu, and Pandu's and Dhritarashtra's son, that is Pandavas and Kauravas, are all later to the 10th mandala. And that is what the Kurukshetra War period is all about. So this is how the entire chronology, I am bringing it in a very detailed manner, is structured. And I think since this is also a repeat, maybe I briefly touched upon it in the last session, and now we are elaborately going in, so it becomes like captured inside the mind, and very clearly it gets registered